So let me switch to English because we have one English-speaking person with us today. So yeah, thank you for giving me the chance to present my last paper of my PhD thesis. It's called Diversifying Impact, Exploring the Conditions for Business Incubator Value Capture Across Multiple Domains. It's written with Britta Schermann, who's here from the Hochschule, as you all know, and Marise Chapin, who is a associate professor from Utrecht University, where I'm also doing my PhD. Quickly about the larger topic of my thesis. So my thesis is on value capture and open innovation. So open innovation is when firms or startups or organizations in general decide to look for input, resources, knowledge outside of their organizational boundaries. And they're investigating what type of value they get out of these activities. This last paper of my thesis is not a hypothesis testing paper, as you will see in the theory section, because it applies a kind of different methodology. But first, about the background. So a general agreed upon definition of business incubators is the one that you see. It is a shared office space facility that provides their incubatees, I will call them tenants, strategic value adding agents. There's this difference. You might think of accelerators. That's a term that is more common, I would say. Accelerators are mostly short cohort-based programs, which are like 3, 4 months, 5 months, and they provide equity for ownership, and they want a fast or easy exit of this startup that they're developing, the tenants that they're developing. So it's more the financial interest is more interesting for accelerators. On the other side, what I'm going to be focusing on are there for the early stages of the venture creation process, where tenants are still, or startups are still thinking about their business model, their service product that they're developing, the prototype that they're developing. So early stage of the venture creation process. Therefore, these business incubators, research has identified mostly positive influence of business incubators on entrepreneurial growth, regional development, and at large. In terms of entrepreneurial growth, the incubator provides essential resources that are important for developing ideas, developing the product of the tenants. For regional development, researchers have looked at regional innovation performance measured by R&D intensity and patent applications. And then, of course, in regions where the business incubator is present, these are higher. And social development, business incubators contribute positively to the development of startups that advance the principles of sustainable development. Research gaps. So we basically identified 2 research gaps. So business incubators are kind of caught in regional networks of universities, University of Applied Sciences, government agencies, for-profit firms, and they mostly balance their internal interest with the demands of these regional stakeholders. Because sometimes regional development agency have the expectation towards the business incubator that, hey, you're here for regional development. The for-profit firm has the demand, hey, you're here to provide us with startups that have interesting ideas that we can implement in our processes or that we can work together with. But of course, the business incubator itself also wants to survive economically. So most of them, they have to kind of provide some economic return else in terms of keeping their day-to-day operations alive. That's the first gap. So they're kind of caught in this balance between balancing their own internal interests and the interests of the regional stakeholders. The second gap is that research has identified a range of business incubator characteristics and strategic choices, more on these later, that influence the value capture of business incubators. However, there's always been a focus on independent factors. So how does one influence the outcome? What we here try to test in this paper and try to focus on is the combination of these characteristics and strategic choices. As we all know from research on organizational behavior, the organizational landscape is complex, and there's always interactions between different factors, characteristics of organizations that produce a certain outcome. And that is why we look at the of these and ask the following research question: which combinations of BI characteristics and strategic choices enable VI value capture diversification. A little bit on the theoretic background. So first, the importance of BI value capture diversification. First, of course, nowadays, in terms of social responsibility, sustainability goals, it is important to not only look for your own economic benefits or following a certain business, when you're following certain business operations. So first, it aligns with these principles. Second, we know in these, as I mentioned in the introduction, these business incubators are connected to other regional stakeholders. And in order to cover all the benefits that are created and also eventually captured in such open innovation systems, it is important to include both economic and non-economic if you want to cover all the potential benefits that are captured in these kind of situations. Second, as I mentioned in the introduction, by diversifying the value capture, business incubators satisfy these diverse stakeholder expectations that region stakeholders have towards them producing certain type of outcomes. In terms of characteristics and strategic choices, what are we looking at here? So it has, of course, there's all kinds of characteristics and strategic choices has been investigated from research, but mostly like these 5 are important when it comes to business incubator operations. And now we have, which is later important for the methodology that we apply, we have certain type of expectations, how they might behave in relation to business incubator value capture. It's not that we test certain types of hypotheses. So in terms of age, older business incubators, they had the time to acquire valuable resources, expertise, experiences, and institutional knowledge. And also there's research that business incubator, they follow a certain type of life cycle where they move from initially just improving their services to better support tenant progress to then eventually being a more active player in regional business networks and take a role in shaping these entrepreneurial networks. That's why age is related to this business incubator and value capture diversification. And yeah, for type, normally research differentiates between 2 types or 2 larger groups of types, public and private, and public then being university initiated ones or municipality initiated ones, and private ones being independent ones and corporate initiated. And the idea here is that these public and private business incubators, they have different objectives and priorities driven by, of course, their ownership structure and stakeholder expectations. And that then influences this outcome that we are examining. For size, of course, larger business incubators, they benefit from economies of scale. They have more resources, but of course they face that was research identified. They face struggles in facilitating informal research knowledge exchanges among their tenants. For service variety, in terms of offering services, of course, if you offer more services, you can support tenants more comprehensively. You have, for every need, you have services. And also, some business incubator offer services in terms of financial return. So increases the chance that you're creating economic returns. And it can also be seen as kind of a legitimacy factor for potential tenants outside of the business incubator. If they provide a lot of services, they are seen as legitimate, and so they attract valuable tenants. For openness orientation, through these networking activities that business incubator facilitate, first internally among the tenants, but also with external stakeholders, tenants gain access to a larger pool of resources and knowledge, which helps them to progress and also build up legitimacy through connections with these external stakeholders. Also, business incubators may act as hubs of regional knowledge spillovers, which can, of course, promote the circulation of ideas and expertise. So later in the analysis, we expect that age, service variety, and openness is related to the outcome, and for the other 2 types, have any expectations. That's just someone who is familiar with the methodology, might be interested in knowing that. Data, where's the data coming from? So we went through a long process of first kind of course, elaborate process on designing the questionnaire. It was constructed based on existing literature, qualitative interviews, and it was also pre-tested with different business incubators, independent ones, for-profit ones, public ones. Target population was created with the help of a student assistant, and we always combined region names in Germany. We looked at the context of Germany, region names in Germany with certain types of keywords, how these business incubators are mostly referred to, as you see here. And of course, there exist some lists, interactive maps in Germany where these business incubators are placed, are situated, located. And to specifically identify corporate initiated ones, we look at the companies listed in German stock market, DAX or MDAX, because these were sometimes a little bit more difficult to identify. That resulted in 139 complete responses of 547 that we contacted, and 122 usable responses, because we had to exclude 6 cases because they were established after June 2022, and some of our questions pertain to the year of 2022, and also 11 cases did not the international definition of a business incubator. Now coming to the operationalization of variables, or how it's here called, calibration. So I'm going to apply later on the analytical strategy, I'm going to apply qualitative comparative analysis. In qualitative comparative analysis, operationalization, how it's called in regressions, is called calibration, and variables are referred to as conditions. So that's what I will be using, these words. First, for business incubator value capture diversification. We had these 4 general value categories: economic, tenant, regional, societal, and they were all captured or measured with different items that were, and the business incubator managers, they always had to evaluate how well they exploited their potential in the year of 2022 for each of these items. So to give you an example, looking at the economic value items, if they responded for each of these items, or for the first one 0%, then 50%, 25, 75, the average was 37.5%. And then the final condition, the outcome condition, was then calibrated based on these averages and based on if a certain type of outcome category was a goal. So they are always calibrated, the conditions based on 0 and 1. 0 meaning more of what we are observing. So in this case, business incubator value capture. 1 meaning more of what we're observing, and 0 meaning not. So no business incubator value capture. And here you can see the calibration. So 1 being 4 out of 4 domains are a goal, plus value capture largest 0%. And then 0 being 1 or 2 out of 4 domains are a goal, and value capture 0%. Yeah. So that means if I later talk about business incubator value capture diversification, it means that at least in 3 of these domains, there's value capture larger than 0%, and it is a goal of the business incubator to capture value in these cases. Now for the other conditions, not the outcome condition. First, openness orientation. We had again a few items to measure internal openness, so how knowledge is facilitated internal the business incubator, and then external openness, how knowledge is facilitated across the borders of the incubator. For this question, the business incubator managers, they had to evaluate how many tenants use these activities. So for example, for internal openness, it was about co-working spaces, a shared laboratory, a digital platforms like Slack or intranet, a relaxation area where relax and play pool table, which is most common in these institutions. And then the final, or the condition openness and orientation was then calibrated based on combinations of how many tenants used these services. As you can see here, I'm not going to go through 0 to 1. Yeah, it's just with increasing strength, more and more tenants use these services. The other conditions: age, 1 meaning older, type, 1 is private, 0 is public, Size, 20 or more tenants were larger business incubators, less than 20 tenants were smaller ones. And service variety, 10 services being 1, 0, 1 service, offering 0, 1 service was 0, and then everything in between. Now coming to the analytical strategy, I'm going to try to make this a bit tangible because I think some have not heard of this method before. It's called fuzzy set qualitative comparative analysis. You might think of qualitative. What is that to do with qualitative? It kind of developed from the insights of qualitative and quantitative insights. That's how this developed first in sociology. And it's able to model especially these interactions between multiple conditions being variables, but yeah. So what QCA does not help to identify, like in regression, the magnitude of the effect of a single factor in isolation, but instead it helps to account for the complex interplay between different factors that bring about a certain type of outcome. That is what QCA is for, especially about these this interplay, this combination of factors, of conditions. And in comparison to variable-based approaches, it relies on set relationships and treats different combinations of conditions as distinct cases. Quickly, the second or the third point, before I come back to the second point, it helps to identify necessary versus sufficient conditions. The difference here is a necessary condition is a condition that always needs to be present for the outcome to occur. On the other side, a sufficient condition is a condition that if the outcome is observed, the condition that is present. This is the general definition of the two. It took me ages to get the difference because I looked in different papers and they all explain it like this, what I just, these two. And I think, in my opinion, it's not clear what the difference is. So for necessary, if a condition is necessary, it always needs to be there if the outcome is there. For sufficient, a certain type of condition is associated with the outcome, but there are also other conditions that are associated with it. That's the difference. Now talking about these set relationships. Here, this is part of the analysis. The first step is always to construct the truth table. Now this is, I show you this to give you some information on the methodology that it becomes tangible for you. And maybe it helps in understanding what this actually does. So in our case, we have 5 conditions: age, type, services, age, type, size, services open, which means we have 2, because each can take the occurrence or the instance of 1 or 0, 2 to the power of 5 different combinations of these 5 conditions. So 32 in total. And what the truth table then does, before we try to minimize, so the results then are based on the truth table. The truth table is minimized, and that then leads to the results. So the truth table looks at, for example, looking at this first row. In yellow, we can see there's 10. If you look at all the way to the right, n equals 10. There's 10 cases that show these Ausprägungen, for age 1, type 0, size 1, service 1, and open 0, and the outcome being there. The inclusion and PRI in red are measures of consistency and relevance. Yeah. And then in blue, the bracket in blue means which cases are associated with this type of condition, combination of conditions, which are referred to as configurations. The result is then based on how well certain type of configurations or combination of conditions are explained by the data. And then the results just minimize this truth table to come out with, this is the result. Yeah. So in the result in general, we have 6 configurations. As you can see, the brackets 1 to 6. A black dot always means the condition is present. Crossed out dot means it is absent. And an empty cell means it can either be present or absent. So I don't care. That's what they always frame it as. First, in terms of like R square, in terms of regression, it's called R square. Here we look at solution consistency and solution coverage. As a rule of thumb, the coverage should always be solution coverage about above 0.5, which we have 0.583, and the consistency should be above 0.7. The consistency decreases if there are more cases that are part of any of the configurations in the solution that are not associated with the outcome. So there's a measure of does the outcome, the solution formula, these configurations, represent well the outcome via value capture diversification. And the coverage then is kind of a empirical strength measure. So it measures the proportion of the outcomes covered by the solution formula. To give you a better idea, here we take a figure from the paper from the book by Warner, Schneider, and Thoman. If Y, the circle Y, is the solution, the whole solution space. Of course, not all of the possible solutions are covered by my solution formula, by this sixth configuration. That is why only 58, the solution coverage percent. As you can see here, we have a solution with 3 configurations, X, Y, and B, C. Now, if we look into the table at the raw coverage and unique coverage, each configuration covers a certain type of area in the solution space. But of course, sometimes there's overlap, as you can see with X and Y. And that's where this difference between raw and unique coverage comes from. So the raw coverage is the whole circle of X, if we take X, for example. And the unique coverage is X, the space that is covered by X and A. So the unique coverage is kind of sometimes referred to as the explanatory power of a configuration. So then we can see that, for example, configuration 6 has the largest unique coverage. So it has the largest explanatory power, yes, in my solution formula. In general, so the key findings. So my solution reveals 6 distinct configurations that are associated with diversification. How I read it, it emphasizes the role of these strategic choices, service variety and openness orientation. Why? If we look at configuration 1 to 4, sorry, it is all older, because age is always present. It is all older business incubators, and there's either service variety or openness. If we look at 5 and 6, it is younger, or in the case of 5, don't care, so younger or older. It's both. Both of service variety and openness are present. So either service variety or openness are always present in any configuration. That means, in my opinion, older business incubators, they can diversify the value capture if that is an interest of them, by either investing in services or a large variety of services or facilitate openness, whereas younger ones can also achieve the outcome if they invest in both. Now, these are a little bit sensitive to changes in the calibration of the conditions. That's why we did a range of robustness checks. But if you're interested in that, of course, more on that later during the question and answer. Discussion. So where does that leave us? First, a few implications for theory. Now, of course, by considering these different domains at the same time, what we did in the analysis, this study offers a more comprehensive perspective on how business incubators capture value. Instead of just one category, one specific category where they capture value on, what previous literature did, or one domain, we look at the larger umbrella, the larger impact on themselves, on tenants, the region, and the society, and thereby we provide new insights in understanding the outcomes they produce. As I mentioned, it shows the importance of service variety and openness orientation, because it shows that business incubators, they need to align their strategic choices with the characteristics of their institution, if, of course, diversified value capture is their objective. At least one of these 2 strategic choices was present in every configuration, and in some even both. And lastly, compared to traditional regression-based approaches, fuzzy set qualitative comparative analysis offers a more nuanced understanding of how combinations of different conditions to value capture diversification. And such approaches, of course, or this approach that I applied here, they highlight the more varied and context-dependent nature of effective BI strategies. Now, within the larger context of my thesis, how does this paper play in here? It shows that openness orientation, or open innovation, openness orientation in my case, should be aligned with the characteristics of the institution. If the research of on open innovation. Open innovation is always measured in terms of how well did you collaborate with, or with how many other organizations did you collaborate, and how deeply, maybe how fruitful was the collaboration. So it's very rarely studied in terms of the context of the larger organization, and that's what I highlight here. So it is important to look into open innovation from within the context of the organization that we are investigating, if we take it a bit more to a general level. In terms of practice, of course, based on our results, we could recommend that BI managers pay attention to their institutional characteristics and then align the strategic choices. Should I invest into more services? Should I start more services? Should I facilitate openness to a higher degree? These decisions, align these with, am I an older business incubator? Am I public, privately initiated? Am I a larger, smaller one? And of course, second one, for regional policymakers, regional development institutions, they have an incentive to encourage business incubators to align these choices and characteristics, because for them, what is important is that the region prospers, that the region is attractive to outside tenants, to outside organizations. And this can be achieved, like they can then directly work together with business incubators and provide individualized solutions based on their characteristics, and consult them with which strategies they should invest in or improve in order to enhance overall impact of the business incubator. That's it already. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions or suggestions, I'm happy to hear them.